Welcome back to the channel where we explore the darkest corners of real human experience. Today we're diving deep into 7 terrifying true horror stories that will make you question what happens when the ordinary world turns sinister. If you've never been here before, hit that subscribe button right now because we upload stories like these every single week and you won't want to miss what we've got coming. Our first story takes place in a quiet suburban neighborhood where a young woman named Sarah began experiencing something inexplicable in her home. Every single night at 3 in the morning, she would wake up gasping for air, unable to move her body. She felt a crushing weight pressing down on her chest, like invisible hands gripping her throat. Her eyes would dart around the dark bedroom, and she swore she could see a shadowy figure standing at the foot of her bed, watching her with an intensity that made her blood run cold. Night after night, this terror repeated itself. Sarah visited doctors who suggested sleep paralysis, a scientific explanation where the mind wakes but the body remains frozen. But Sarah knew something was different. The figure felt real, present, malevolent. She began researching the history of her home and discovered that 15 years earlier, a man had suffered a fatal heart attack in that exact bedroom. He died alone, thrashing against his mattress as his heart seized, gasping for that final breath. When Sarah learned this detail, she understood. Whatever was happening wasn't just her imagination. One night, Sarah set up her phone to record video while she slept. The footage showed her body convulsing, her mouth open in a silent scream, her eyes wide with terror. But in the corner of the frame, there was something else. A dark silhouette that seemed to shift and move independently of any light source in the room. She moved out of that house the next morning and never returned. Our second story involves a group of friends who decided to explore an abandoned psychiatric hospital in rural Michigan. The facility had been closed since the 1970s after multiple investigations into patient abuse and unexplained deaths. The friends brought flashlights and cameras, eager to document paranormal activity for their online audience. What they found instead was evidence of something far more disturbing than ghosts. As they walked through the decaying corridors, they discovered patient records still scattered across desks and filing cabinets. The files detailed horrific treatments, patients subjected to ice water immersion therapy, forced electroshock treatments, and experimental medications with no informed consent. But the most chilling discovery came in the basement. They found a locked room, and inside, the walls were covered in scratch marks. Deep gouges in the concrete and plaster, where fingernails had desperately clawed at the surface. The friends realized they were looking at the physical evidence of someone's psychological breakdown, their final moments of sanity slipping away. One of the friends, a young man named Marcus, felt compelled to touch the wall. As soon as his fingers made contact with those scratches, he reported hearing a sound, a low, guttural moan that seemed to come from the wall itself. He described it as the sound of human suffering concentrated into pure acoustic form. Marcus withdrew his hand immediately, and the group left the building in silence. Weeks later, Marcus began having vivid nightmares about being trapped in dark spaces, unable to escape. Those dreams continue to this day. Our third story is about a woman named Jennifer who experienced something that shattered her understanding of reality itself. She worked the night shift as a nurse at a regional hospital. And one evening, she was tasked with transporting a comatose patient from one wing to another. The patient, a man in his 60s, had been in a vegetative state for 3 years, showing absolutely no signs of consciousness or awareness. As Jennifer wheeled the bed down the dimly lit corridor, the fluorescent lights above began flickering rhythmically. The patient's eyes suddenly snapped open, and he stared directly at Jennifer with perfect clarity and intelligence. In a voice that sounded hollow and wrong, he spoke her name. Her actual name, not her name tag. He described intimate details about her life, her childhood home, her deceased grandmother, memories she'd never shared with anyone. He told her exactly when and how she would die, speaking with absolute certainty. Jennifer froze, unable to move or speak. After he finished his prophecy, the patient's eyes rolled back into his head, and his body went completely limp. He returned to his comatose state and never moved again. Jennifer finished her shift in a state of shock, and she reported the incident to her supervisor, but the patient's family confirmed that he had not regained consciousness since his stroke 3 years prior. The hospital's security footage of the corridor showed no evidence of anyone speaking, yet Jennifer knows exactly what she heard. Our fourth story takes us to a rural highway in Nevada, where a traveling salesman named Robert picked up a hitchhiker on a cold desert night. The hitchhiker was a young woman in a white sundress, seemingly out of place in the middle of nowhere. Robert felt sorry for her and offered her a ride to the next town. The woman was quiet and didn't speak much, but Robert found himself unable to stop talking, sharing details about his life, his family, his regrets. After driving for what felt like an hour, Robert realized he couldn't remember anything about the route. The landscape looked identical to how it had 30 minutes earlier. He pulled over to check his GPS, and that's when he noticed something terrifying in the rearview mirror. The woman in the white dress hadn't moved an inch. She was still in the exact same position, staring straight ahead with eyes that didn't blink. Her hands were folded perfectly in her lap. She looked like a doll. Robert slowly turned around to face her, and she turned her head to look at him with mechanical precision. She smiled, but the smile wasn't natural. It was too wide, the facial muscles moving in an order that seemed wrong. She told him that she had been hitchhiking on this road for 47 years. She said she wasn't actually in his car. Robert was in her car, and he always had been. Robert looked down at the steering wheel and realized his hands were slightly transparent. He looked at the road ahead and recognized his own abandoned vehicle crashed in a ditch 50 yards ahead. Robert's mind fractured in that moment. When the state police found his car the next morning, they found only Robert's body still gripping the wheel, dead for at least a week. Our fifth story centers on a young couple who moved into a beautiful Victorian house in upstate New York. The price was shockingly low, and the real estate agent seemed almost relieved when they agreed to purchase it. On their first night, they set up their bedroom in the master suite on the second floor. The room was spacious, with high ceilings and old hardwood floors. That night, both of them were awakened by the sound of footsteps in the hallway outside their room. They heard the soft padding of bare feet moving slowly past their door, back and forth, back and forth. This continued for hours. They called the police, but the officers found no one. They checked every window and door, all of which were locked from the inside. The next night, the footsteps returned. By the third night, the couple was attempting to track the footsteps with their phone's flashlight, opening their door to try to see who was there. The hallway was always empty, but on the fourth night, they saw something. As the footsteps passed their open door, they caught a glimpse of a figure in their peripheral vision. It was a man in old-fashioned night clothes, and his feet weren't touching the floor. He was hovering, gliding down the hallway with an expression of deep confusion and distress on his face, as if he didn't understand what was happening to him. The couple moved out the next day and discovered the house's history. 20 years earlier, a man had died in that house from a massive stroke. He'd been the only occupant at the time, and his body wasn't discovered for 2 weeks. The authorities theorized he'd spent his final hours in confusion and disorientation, unable to understand his own paralysis. He'd been trying to call for help, pacing the hallways in the darkness. Our sixth story is perhaps the most unsettling because it happened to someone we can all understand. A teenager named David loved photography and would often go on solo hikes through the dense forests near his small town. One autumn, he brought his camera along and captured hundreds of photos of trees, wildlife, and natural landscape. When he developed the images at home that evening, he noticed something strange in several of the photographs. In the background of multiple images, partially obscured by trees and fog, was a figure that hadn't been present when he took the photos. In some images, it was closer than in others. It appeared to be following him through the forest, always just far enough away to remain partially hidden. The more David examined the images, the more he realized the figure was growing progressively closer in each successive photo. In the final image David had taken that day, the figure was only 10 feet away, its face unclear but its presence absolutely unmistakable. David showed the photos to the local sheriff, who investigated the area but found no evidence of anyone else having been in the forest that day. However, when they examined the metadata on David's photos, they confirmed his timeline. The images had been taken in sequence, roughly 1 minute apart. Someone or something had followed David deeper and deeper into that forest, closing the distance with each passing moment. David never went hiking again, and those photographs remain unexplained to this day. Our final story is about something that occurred in a suburban basement that challenges our understanding of physics and reality itself. A family hired a contractor named Thomas to waterproof their basement as they'd been experiencing flooding during heavy rains. While working in the far corner of the basement, Thomas discovered a small door built into the concrete foundation wall. It was only about 3 feet tall, made from an old wood that had darkened with age. The family claimed they'd never seen this door before, despite living in the house for 8 years. Curious, Thomas attempted to open it. The door was stuck solid, sealed shut by decades of dust and deterioration. He chipped away at the plaster around the frame and managed to pry it open. Behind the door was a small space, barely 2 feet deep, carved out of the earth. Inside, he found old photographs stacked in neat piles. Thomas carefully removed them and showed them to the homeowners. The photographs showed their exact house, photographed from the street, but they were dated 1938. In the background of several images, you could see people standing on the porch, but their faces were impossibly clear, impossibly detailed, and when the family examined them closely, they recognized the faces. They were their own ancestors. But here's where it becomes truly disturbing. The family brought the photographs to a genealogist, who discovered that those ancestors hadn't taken any photographs of this house. There were no records of the family ever possessing a camera. There were no photographer's marks on the back of these images. And most chillingly, the photographs were printed on photographic paper that didn't exist until 1960. The photographs had captured their ancestors in a house that wouldn't be built for another 10 years. The family never discovered how those photographs came to be in that sealed space. Thomas completed his waterproofing work and was paid in full, but he refused to ever return to that property. The sealed door was never opened again. The photographs remain in the family's possession, and they still cannot explain how or why they exist. These 7 stories represent just a fraction of the unexplained phenomena that occur in our world every single day. If you found these accounts as fascinating and terrifying as we did, please give this video a like, because your support helps us bring you more incredible stories. And if you have your own experience with something paranormal or genuinely unexplainable, drop it in the comments below. We read every single comment, and your stories might inspire our next compilation. Thank you so much for watching, and please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our future uploads. We'll see you in the next video.